So I see on my screen that a lot of people are on mute. This isn't really going to be as a presentation, so feel free to jump in at any time. We are trying to get answer questions and make it a much more collaborative discussion as we're going. So please don't feel necessary to stay muted on mute the entire time. If you got questions, ask away at any time as we're going through this stuff. There's some exciting news that'll be coming out. We are releasing the next candidate version of the spec. So I believe Rachel sent out kind of the overview document this morning. All right, we got a lot more people coming in.
People are getting a sneak peek before it's available on the website. So take a look at that when you have a moment. I know it's a little bit long, but the other ones are a little bit more substantial. So it's a nice overview for you. All right, it's 5 after, Mike.
Yep.
I did put that in the chat that folks can be muted, not muted, whatever. We are recording today because we know not everybody can make the time of these. So just be aware of that. And the recording will then be posted and shared on the website and other sort of channels. With that, I will hand it over to Mike to get us started.
Thank you very much. And you're handling the people coming into the waiting room. Thank you, Rachel. So welcome to the second meeting of the user group. There's actually 2 different user groups. There's one for owners, operators, so people that would apply the data specification in their operation. There is a separate user group for technology providers. And that one's actually next week. So if you kind of weren't sure which user group to join, feel free to join both. But we are going to try to start tailoring the discussions and content for each user group to be more specific to, are you a technology provider and trying to figure out how to work with other technology providers to implement the spec as well as third-party industries? Or are you a owner operator and are trying to figure out how to use a spec within your own business and accomplish some of your own business objectives? We're going to continue as we grow the scale and size of these user groups to put a little bit more organization to them. And to that point, I'd like to introduce Chris Perry. We've asked Chris to kind of help be more of I'll call it the ringleader for this user group, making sure that questions are getting answered, thinking about what activities we should do to increase adoption and learning and the availability to have your questions answered. So big welcome to Chris. And Chris, thank you for stepping up to help out with that. All right, kind of going through this. There we go. So some of this, this is a recap of what we talked about the last time. And this is the big challenge for parking and mobility. It's the connectivity with everything else that's going on in the world. Down at the bottom, you can see we have parking spaces, you have valets, you have cars that are parking on street, but then we also have EV chargers, we have scooters, and we have even delivery services now. So it's grown beyond just parking. And through parking, you have to deal with third-party mobile payment services. There's marketplaces, there's data aggregators, and then every parking operator has their own tool. And we're slowly more and more layers of entities and people and organizations are in between the end of parking or the mobility service and that end consumer. And they may get the service through their phone, through a computer, or through their car directly. And it's through all of that exchange of data that is creating the challenges for us as an industry to be efficient and effective. In the end, the goal is to make it easy for customers to find and select parking or mobility services. People aren't looking to go park their car. People aren't looking to go ride a bus. People aren't looking to ride a scooter. They're looking to get from point A to point B. And I think all of us, and as we've talked about in the industry for multiple years, our goal is to help people get from point A to point B. And that's really why the data specification was created, was to help within the parking industry better communicate information and data. As we grow into transportation and mobility, make those connections, as well as with other industries that need access to parking, and that may be the restaurants, it may be hotels, it may be event centers. So we'll talk through some of the work that's being done right now with other standards in that regards to help promote that. So what is our challenge? Kind of summarizing what we were just looking at. It's sharing data is a necessity in a connected world. Today, entities use different terms and formats to store and send data. We've got to make it easier for them. And because of all those different formats, there are a lot of entities are expending a significant amount of effort and cost just to share basic data. That's not really helping us move things forward. It's not helping the technology providers move things forward more quickly. And that's what the standards do. It allows us to make it easier to create and share and integrate data, because we're going to work from common definitions. We're going to work from common messaging formats. That doesn't mean every system has to work the same way. We aren't just saying, here's the best practice of how a permit solution should work, or here's the best practice of how a park system should work, or here's the best practice of how a mobile payment solution should work. That is still up for every technology provider and every owner operator to come up with what they think is best for their operations. What we are focused on is making sure when two entities need to share data, they have common definitions and they know how to quickly share that data between themselves, so that we spend less time trying to integrate data and more times trying to innovate with the data. And then, as we talked about, while we started out as the Alliance for Parking Data Standards, we very quickly realized that it's much more than just parking. It's mobility services, it's delivery services, it's robots on sidewalks, and it's other uses for sidewalks and curb areas. There's especially through the pandemic, there's been an explosion in the need for sharing data and for accessing and generating revenue from different assets. And the example would be that robots on a sidewalk. We're actually engaged with an ISO specification that's working on automated delivery services that's leveraging the APDS data specification in their specification. So we're seeing an incredible connection or need for that data that the parking and mobility industry has had, and people want to tap into that to deliver their services. And that just kind of goes into kind of recasting that first picture. Here is all the stuff that's happening, whether it's public transport, EV charging, on-street on-street parking, micromobility. We're working with some European organizations on truck parking. So not even public parking, more of the truck parking on highways and roadways to improve their efficiency. So there is a lot of places in need for that sharing of data, and it's going to open up our services that we provide from a parking and mobility perspective to many other entities and organizations that need help or access to that. So as a reminder, what is the Alliance for Parking Data Standards? It was founded by three associations: the European Parking Association, International Parking and Mobility Institute, and the British Parking Association. And through their efforts, it got the ball rolling and started gaining a lot of support from other folks. Since then, we've gotten a lot more people involved who are supporting the effort, both with resources, people, time, and knowledge. And these are the groups that have been actively supporting the APDS group with financial support and resources support. But in addition to that, we have well over 60 other entities across the globe that are supporting that. And we'll show you their list on the website here in a minute. So we're always looking for more help. It's a big, if you have a desire to get more involved with APDS or in the specification, we would love to hear from you. I mean, that was one of the things Chris did with us a couple months ago. He reached out, he saw the value of this and wanted to get more involved. And so we're looking for people who have the time and the desire to engage their colleagues and their peers, as well as other industries, to help communicate the value of data sharing and the value of this data specification as well. Any questions at that? Okay, remember, this is a user group session, so if there are questions, this is not a presentation. You would not be interrupting me or my flow, so feel free to ask questions at any time as we're going through. So the guiding, oh, was there a question? The guiding principles, this is pretty important because we want to make sure everyone is clear on what the objectives of the APDS organization are. First of all, it's a not-for-profit collaboration with input from industry experts. We aren't trying to provide best practices to anyone on how to run a parking facility or mobility facility. We are not trying to generate revenue or promote specific services. Our goal is to define a common language so that all of us within the industry know the definition of specific data elements. We have methods of which to share that data effectively and fairly. And then more importantly, that we have a way to consistently communicate with outside parties outside of the parking industry to share that information. So when you get the documents, you'll see we've developed common data definitions and associations for parking and mobility activities. That's critical in how to share data. That is the translator of, if you will, between different specifications and how different entities use the data. We have the specification that enables the easier sharing, and we've been extensively collaborating with external stakeholders. A lot of people in the automotive industry we've been engaged with, a lot of entities in the intelligent transportation systems, and the mobility as a service. We've done a lot of work with various European specifications and data entities. For the North American folks, the EU has been much more organized and thoughtful in how they are promoting and sharing data across their different countries. And they have adopted APDS as a main mechanism to share data within the EU. And so that's been very good for us. And our goal is to integrate parking more effectively with other standards, and you'll see that here shortly. A very key point, APDS is not trying to generate revenue off of data, and we are not trying to control or aggregate data. That is for other entities to do. We only want to provide the language and the specification that allow other entities to do that. So there are commercial entities that process transactions and collect data and distribute it. There are public entities, and we're seeing a lot of national parking platforms being developed that will also control and aggregate data. That is their goal. We just want to be the entity that or the specification that allows that to happen more effectively and easily. So those are really important guiding principles as you try to wonder, like, how does APDS fit in with whether you're running a technology business or if you are a city or a university or a private operator. How does this fit in with you? There is no desire to control or generate revenue off your transactions. We are trying to be a neutral entity that focuses on defining clear definitions and enabling the fair and equitable sharing of data across groups. So this goes
we
into
we have a question from Mike King about how APDS reconciles with mobility data standards.
Yeah,
and I had a similar question as well about smart cities and stuff. How do we bump up against that and reconcile those overlaps?
Yeah, so actually OMF, we have been engaging with them and will be continuing to collaborate on where the standards can collaborate and where they don't collaborate. How do you transition from one to the other? So Mike, I mean, we'd be glad if you have a follow-up question to that. I can tell you, like I said, we've been talking to OMF. We actually presented to them in the beginning back in January, February, and we'll continue to collaborate with them. And Chris, so you want to go with your question real quick?
Yeah, I think your diagram speaks a little bit to it, but I would imagine there's some overlap between the data standards where
yes.
we're naming similar fields. So how do we handle that?
Yeah, great question. And I can tell you, this is where we need help, and this is where we need, hopefully through this user group, we find people that want to get engaged and help in that discussion. These are all the different entities that we've already engaged with and are collaborating on different data specs already. This is a little bit more of a European view because they've been more further along than us. So the APDS is right now in the final steps of becoming ISO. We're in the final, I think, month and a half of open comment periods, of which then those comments get consolidated, reviewed, and then a final version of the ISO specification is released for it's a preview of when it's published a year later. So that's underway. We've been working with the automotive industry on their automated valet parking systems. There's an entire spec around that, which is defining how the cars are going to interact with parking facilities. We've engaged with their spec and have actually helped to morph and refine it so that they refer to APDS for specific data elements. We're not trying to be the data specification to cover everything, but we are trying to share where there are common data definitions. We try to sync up those data definitions. And so like for an OMF, that's exactly what we'll be doing there. DataX2, for the folks on the call that are European, you'll recognize DataX2 is a significant ITS, Intelligent Transportation System, data standard within Europe. It governs how a lot of the roadways work, how transportation systems communicate to each other. I believe it's part 6 is in the process of being revised to more align with APDS. And that was a collaborative effort where we met with the DataX folks. We went through definitions, we reviewed data structures, and we helped to better kind of align and synchronize the different data definitions so that DataX2 is still a separate spec. But if people are using DataX2 and they come across entities that are using the APDS spec, they're going to know that they are already in sync and that they'll be able to translate their systems between those two specs quite easily. NetX is another model coming out of Europe, mainly France, which is around their mass transit and mobility services. That's another one that we have been collaborating with, as well as with DataX to sync up. And then when you go to the left side of the picture, you can see curbside management and traffic regulations. Britain has a very defined traffic regulations program, and we're in the process of syncing up where it makes sense to use APDS related definitions in their efforts. And the same will be the curbside management. I referenced some work that's going on with automated robot delivery systems and how they navigate sidewalks. That ISO specification is also relying on, or I should say leveraging, the APDS data definitions. So the key on how we collaborate with those is to start a dialogue. It's not about matter of having a single spec. It's a matter of collaboration and ensuring that the data definitions are consistent where appropriate. So that was a great question. Any follow-ups to that or other questions? And I think this is a very good slide that you're looking at right now, because it does show there is already tremendous overlap in each of those circles or ovals today. And you can see where those standards tend to lie. No one standard covers all of it. So the goal is to ensure common data definitions so that an entity that may participate in multiple ovals doesn't have to deal with multiple different data specifications. There will be some uniformity in there. So this is the current APDS specification. Actually, this is the release 3 candidate. So if you've only downloaded the 2.1, within the next couple of days, the release candidate will be available. It's going to be out there for public comment. So you'll be able to review it. We're asking for people to send us their comments and thoughts on it. and then we'll go through a revision before it's finalized sometime in late July or August. Going through the different data domains, which are the green boxes, those are the significant data areas. We have the concept of place. Place defines the structure, whether it's a garage, a curb space, an open surface lot. Through the hierarchy data, you have the ability to add as much detail as you may want to an area. So you may have a parking garage. Through the hierarchy data, you may be able to say there are 5 levels to that garage. You may further break down a certain level to say part of it's reserved, part of it's unreserved, and part of it is for pickup or loading and unloading. And you can either further refine that hierarchy. You have the ability to define layout, structure, and equipment related data, operating characteristics, like are trucks allowed, are there height limits, operating hours, contact data, payment methods that are accepted, and then all the way down to space data. Rights is a very critical data concept within the APDS spec. A right is what allows, it is the definition of what an entity is allowing other people to do. So as an example, when someone pulls into a parking garage and they pull a ticket to park in the garage, they're being granted a right to park in that garage, maybe as a public parker. If it was a residential building, a resident may be granted a hang tag or an AVI card to enter the garage. Then as a resident of the building, they are giving the right to park, but a public person would not have that right to park in that garage. Those rights also apply to delivery services, to rideshare services. Are they allowed to load or unload at certain times? For delivery services, is UPS allowed to deliver on a certain street between 3 and 5 p.m. or are they restricted to 5 to 7 p.m.? So that's a pretty important data specification. In addition to defining what the permission being granted is, you have the ability to define eligibility criteria. As an example, are you a resident or not? You define what kind of credentials demonstrate your ability to have the right. Is it a license plate? Is it an AVI tag? Is it a paper ticket? You have the data about the assigned right. Who was the specific person that was, or a vehicle that was given that permission? And then finally, we have the basic financial data. And that is going to be a change. In 2.1, financial data was under session data. We have since moved it over to the rights data because we recognize if someone's buying a monthly pass, the financial transaction isn't so much on when you're using it, it's more about when you've been given the right to use it and have you purchased that right. So that was a correction that you'll see in 3.0. Rates data, pretty self-explanatory. This describes how someone may be charged to use a right, and that may be vary based on the place. It may be based on your qualifications. Are you a member of a certain group? Did you attend a gym? Did you go to a restaurant? Are you a resident of a building? Are you an employee, or are you the public? Quote data is new to release 3.0. This basically allows entities to share, well, it's exactly as it sounds. It's a quote. It allows 2 entities to share, here's the expected cost if you want to buy this right at this specific time in this place. A quote can have an expiration date. So it allows 2 entities to quickly share information about a proposed transaction. And then if they want to complete that transaction, then they can complete it and the quote gets turned into an actual assigned right and associated session data. So it helps us tie up other organizations. This is a big one coming out of the automotive industry that is very interested in how to do transactions, but they know that they need to get some information before they do. Occupancy utilization data. Again, we have the supply side of the data. How many parking spaces do I have? How much area do I have for loading, unloading? And then we have the demand side of the data. What is actually being used? How is that usage being determined? Is it being done with a manual inspection every 24 hours? Or is there a sensor that's monitoring the area every 3 seconds or 2 seconds? So that is how we collect that data up and show it. Then down at the bottom, we have session data. That's tracking the actual use of an assigned right. When someone enters a facility, when they exit a facility, when a delivery truck enters a delivering zone, and when they leave a delivery zone. Session data connected with rights data allows that people to do enforcement. If you have an assigned right and your session data is in the proper time, there's no enforcement action. If you have a session data that's occurring, but you don't have an assigned right, that's a potential enforcement action. So that's how that data gets used. And then finally, observation data. This is just exactly as it sounds. A lot of our systems collect data about things that they see, whether it's an LPR system, whether it's an RFID reader, whether it's a person doing a manual observation. This is a way to collect that data up and then share it with others for a variety of uses. The other two green boxes are kind of as I talked about. One is common data. We clarified it in 3.0. It's common data that really gets used by all of the other data domains. It probably will be more meaningful to the technical folks because it simplifies how a lot of the APIs work. And then we have energy and infrastructure data. And this is recognizing, this data domain is one that'll grow, but it's recognizing the changes that are happening across the world in regards to electric cars and other energy sources that are being used and how we want to track and share information related to that. The document that Rachel sent out this morning provides a little bit more detail. And when you get the actual documents for 3.0, I mean, it's several hundred pages, or I'm sorry, a couple hundred pages. I don't want to scare you, but there is a lot more detail that you'll be able to go to on all of these elements. So release 3.0 is coming out. It's going to be available for public comment within the next 10 days. Those comments will be open for comments through July. So we strongly encourage everyone to go through, tell us what you like, what you don't like. If you have ideas or think there's things that are missing or don't understand how things work, this is the opportunity for us to incorporate those comments. Comments received will also flow into the ISO documents because right now they're one and the same. So we're trying to keep those in sync. You have the overview document in your emails now, and that'll be on the website here shortly for others to grab as well. When you do get the release 3.0 documents, it actually is 3 additional documents. There's an information model that goes through a lot more detail of each of the specs. There's the data dictionary, excuse me, which goes through the definition of every data element and talks about the various attributes for it. And that's probably the most critical document of all of these. And then we have a use case document, which describes various uses of how the specification can be applied. Excuse me. So I wanted to quickly identify, for those that are familiar with 2.1, some of the changes that are happening in 3.0 by data domain. So within place, we did clarify some data terms. We had some terms that seemed to be duplicative. One of them being hierarchy element. It was used in 2 different ways, so we changed the name of one of them to reduce any confusion. Within the hierarchy elements, we had a concept called identified area. And the identified area is a specialization that allows you to define, is this for parking? Is it for an entry or exit lane? Based on some work that was happening with DataX 2, we identified some necessary expansions to that to make it the APDS work more effectively with what DataX had already set up. So an identified area can now also be defined to include supplemental facility services. As an example, you may want to define a building that has concessions in it, food concessions. There may be a repair center. There may be restrooms and showers, et cetera, like for a truck stop. So we now have the ability to put that into the APDS spec and track those supplemental facility needs. I'm sorry, and it also can include EV chargers. So it also is where you can store equipment and attach more details about the type of equipment that is in a parking structure that may be important to know. We also expanded the existing vehicular access. Originally, the vehicular access was really to describe the entry and exit lanes and ramps within a parking structure or in a surface lot. Again, through the DataX, we identified the need to do a broader view of entry and exit or vehicular access. So it now supports roadways. So for if you have an event center, it'll be applicable to that. If you're trying to bring people in to different parts of the venue, you'll be able to describe those with roadways. If DataX 2 is really focused on truck stops and how to communicate to the trucking community, where are the proper roadways to use to get to a truck stop. Not all of European truck stops were off of a highway. Sometimes you had to get off and drive through communities to get to the actual truck area. So that now supports those concepts more effectively. We added some user-defined code support. One specifically in place is for occupancy utilization. There are many different ways to think about this, but the simplest one is if your entity does a a green, yellow, red kind of view of occupancy, you now have the ability to describe what colors you want and what are your utilization factors. One entity may say red is 90% utilization or better. Another entity may say it's 95% utilization or better is red. So within the APDS specification, each entity will be able to communicate that and share that as well now. And then finally, we expanded the details for organization and context so that we have a richer contact database that can be shared. For rates, we added some more qualifications that can be user-defined rather than standard codes. So that'll give every entity the ability to tailor their qualifications to meet their needs more effectively. So if you need multiple variations of truck types, you can do that for your operation as necessary. If you need to vary different types of other vehicles, you have the ability. We also added emissions as a qualification as well. Again, recognizing the changes that are happening in the globe around green activities. Going into the rights, again, I already commented on this. We moved financial transaction data from sessions to the assigned right. And then quote, we added an entire new domain, which I've already talked about. And again, I think one which will allow a lot of entities to start to share and collaborate more effectively, especially from a consumer basis when individuals are trying to find what their best options may be for parking, for delivery services, or for rideshare pickup. As part of Release 3.0, there is now an API library that is accessible, and it is on the website. We're going to jump over to that in a second here. So the API library has some current best practice messaging formats based on the APDS specification. These are messaging formats that are being used today in various national parking platforms and mobility platforms. So that is a place, if you're trying to figure out where do you start, what can you do, this is a place to start. And it's all available via the website. In addition, on the website, there is a forum, and then we are encouraging people to engage and talk in there about what's working, what's not working, or how are different people solving different questions or needs. So I saw another question came in. Does APDS 3 also support vehicle types like bicycle and pedelectric? So the answer is yes, it does. So one of the things I wanted to quickly do, because I know this is a very popular topic across the globe. Different countries are doing different things, our national parking platforms. And I wanted to kind of go through one of the big projects that's happening in England right now. And I know parking platforms have interest across the globe at different levels. There are a couple cities in the U.S. that are embarking on stuff, similar typical programs. as well as Australia and New Zealand have some projects starting up as well. The city of Manchester is one that is based on the APDS specification. And again, APDS did not build the actual platform. As you look at the diagram, you can see the vertical gray lines. Our interface is being used to communicate information from parking operators into the city's platform. And then the city's platform communicates to third-party providers, if you will, who engage with consumers in the same way. So this really articulates or highlights the value of the APDS specification, because you can now add on multiple other output parties of those customers to be automotive manufacturers. It could be a delivery services such as UPS, FedEx, DHL, etc. You could put Uber Eats in there. You could put multiple other options on the right-hand side. Similarly, on the left-hand side, it allows multiple entities to understand how to share information in. And again, while we list right now what Manchester is focused on is their parking, they could easily have DHL putting on where are their parking entities coming in, what data do they need to share about usage and other things as well. I'll stop here for a second, see if there's any comments.
Mike, I actually had a question. Do we have any examples either here in the US and cities that are requiring APDS and RFPs, or vendors who are doing something proactive to support the standards?
Yeah, I think Mike King, correct me if I'm wrong, at your previous city, you guys weren't requiring it, but were promoting the adoption of it. I'll let Mike talk about it.
That's exactly right, Mike. In the city of Sacramento, recognizing how data-centric the parking industry, the mobility industry, and so forth are becoming, we started putting into all RFPs a request or a requirement actually for the vendor to outline their plans for conforming to the APDS once it became a ratified standard. And then we would use that as part of the judgment criteria. If a vendor said, no, we aren't going to participate, we have no, or what is that, or whatever, they did not score as highly as a vendor who said, oh yes, that is on our roadmap. We are planning to implement it once it's ratified.
I don't know if anyone else has any example. I know on the European side, there are a couple other entities that are doing the similar, and they probably take it a little bit further because they have several EU regulations that require or reference DATEX2, and because DATEX2 and APDS are collaborating, that kind of flows through. That's the DATEX standard automatically attributes stuff to the APDS to support those regulations.
So would it be safe to say that one of the next steps in the initiative is either to have cities request or vendors proactively say, we're supporting, and here's our new API structure that does this, to kind of move the ball down the field?
Yeah, and actually we're going to show you some of the companies that are kind of already saying that they are supporting and are working towards that. I know there are multiple technology providers that are already building systems to support it. So I mean, I'll talk. My own company has, not all of our solutions have been able to adopt the APDS yet, but all of our new solutions are incorporating the data specification into how they are sharing data. And I know there are several other US companies and European companies that are doing the exact same. And we'll actually talk about that in a little bit here as well, that because it's not an overnight thing. It's not you snap your fingers and it's all done. It takes some time for entities to migrate that. Any other comments? Thanks, Mike, for that. Any other comments or questions on that topic? So this then goes to where the city of Manchester is actually trying to get to, and they have a plan to do that. You can see they are going from just a parking platform to a transportation platform, where they're going to have their mobility in there. They're going to have delivery services in there. They're managing their curb space. They're going to be managing the distribution of regulations for use of various spaces. So they have a very big plan to use that. And again, APDS is not running the platform. APDS is just the language on how to communicate and translate data between different systems into the platform. And hopefully it'll help enable and more quickly allow the city to have both sides of the chart more quickly and effectively connect to their platform. So what I really quickly wanted to do, I'm going to stop sharing because I wanted to show the website for those that haven't been out to it. And this obviously, Rachel, feel free to comment on this because Rachel and team have been the driving force to get this built and updated. And if you had been on the previous one, you can see it is a significant improvement. So I don't know, Rachel, do you want to say anything? There are a couple things I wanted to show off.
I'd be happy to. You are quote unquote logged in, Mike. So you're seeing something that's a little different. So if you click that little button there and then log out. So if you log in, you're going to create a quick, you're going to have most of your resources are here, right? Whether you log in or not. But in order to download the documents, submit feedback, things like that, really interact, create a profile there. You just click the login button. You can log back in. Just want people to see that. So you got to click that little login. You're not signing up. No, go up. There we go. Do it all the time. All right. Then log in with email or however you log in, however you typically log in. And then when you go to the resources link, you're going to see essentially members. Click that. They're members only resources. And if you click specifications, you're going to see click the higher. Yeah. You're going to see the GitHub there, which I did post the link in the chat.
I will stress to everyone, if you go to this, this is really, really technical. So grab a good peanut butter jelly sandwich, a good Coke, and it's fun read.
Very technical, but this is locked down, right? Folks can get what they need from it, but they can comment, right? Do they have to create a GitHub login, right, to add comments here?
Yep.
Okay, so that's a separate, obviously we don't manage that entity. We're using GitHub as one of our primary resources. You will see that the overview document, obviously version 3.0 is coming out, so that none of that's been uploaded to the website yet, but it's coming. And if you can see under home, you are in the events. The drop down has events that we're gonna find a better spot for that. About perhaps. Events, get involved, a lot of the information that you see in the overview document obviously lives here. We have another meeting next week for suppliers, consultants, service providers. And you can see that's like, if you click that, that is the current list of supporters. So there's a quick and easy form, to Chris's question. These are organizations who have said, we fully intend to use the APDS standards, specifications in our work, in our operations, et cetera, et cetera. So this list grows every day. It's not up to date as of today. I've gotten some emails today. What happens is you complete the quick form online. You get the APDS supporter logo that you can use on your materials, absolutely free of charge. We definitely want everyone to basically go through this process and say, express support for. Taking your RFPs, you know what I mean, is the next step, right? To develop that language and say, okay, this is how we're going to rank. And Mike, that's terrific to hear that, you know what I mean? That's something that you guys integrated there. You'll also see under that same link, you've got supporters and regional affiliates. Basically, the APDS affiliates are the state and regional associations, all the GPALs, things of that nature. So if you're a member of one of those organizations, there's another form. You just click through and, you know what I mean, basically submit to get your logo up there, and then they get an APDS affiliate logo. If you would go to forum, Mike, this is where your, your little profile logo comes up. So we have some general discussion boards that are here. We'll evolve these as, the case may be and see what folks want to talk about, but general discussions, specific APDS specs, and then other standards. Maybe you come across something really valuable in there and would like to sort of comment and share those things. Super easy to do. You can, play with your profile as you see fit, but this is another way to engage in our community. This is not how you will submit formal comment. So when you receive the documents, you will receive that methodology. Currently, it's through a form on the website. So you literally just type in your comments for version 2.1. We will be sending something that's a little bit different for 3.0. Did I forget anything, Mike? Or does anybody have any questions? I know I went through this fast because I kind of live in here. So is there anything you're looking for that I didn't talk about?
So hopefully we can build this, the forums up
Mhm.
and get better dialogue and discussion going here. I can tell you there are lots of folks. It's been really interesting over the last couple of years engaging globally and hearing how different people are trying to solve stuff. So I encourage everyone, if you've taken the time to be a part of this user group, get involved on the forum. And I think you're going to meet a lot of other folks that are doing things and hearing great ideas and how they're dealing with different challenges as well as opportunities that they're addressing as well. So
Thanks, Mike. So if you come across anything that doesn't make sense or you have questions, just shoot me an email or a note, give me a holler, and we'll resolve them. But thanks, Mike.
yep. Last thing I want to show is if you haven't opened up your email, this is what the overdue document looks like. Like I said, it's 20 pages. And it does a good job of providing a lot more detail or more detail on the different data, the different data domains. So it goes into place, talks about place. You'll get some more ideas and concepts of the key concepts. So if you're looking for just a high level view, I strongly encourage you start with this, and then you'll probably have a better view of where do you want to focus your time and energy as you try to learn or adopt the various elements of the data specification. So take a look at that. And if you have questions or ever want to talk about it, reach out to myself. You can reach out to Chris as well. There's a lot of folks anyone on the website is listed as well, are available to help answer questions as well. All right, so with that, we're kind of getting down to the end. Just a couple more things we wanted to talk about. We kind of already hit about this. So steps to adopt the specification. This is where Chris was going. It's a migration, not an immediate cutover. You got to work with your technology providers and your IT teams to develop a plan and collaborate. Don't expect that this will be done in 2 weeks, 2 months, or even 4 months. This is going to take time. Take small little projects and slowly evolve it. Have a purpose of what you're trying to do. Are you trying to improve the data flowing to Google Maps? That would be a good way to start. Are you trying to improve how your data flows to your mobile pay providers or your reservation platforms? That's a good starting project. But start with a project. Don't try to boil the ocean at one time. It's a lot. Set expectations about adopting the specification and defining data ownership. Mike King gave a great example of how the city of Sacramento was doing it. They were telling people, this is what we're looking to do. We're going to make you aware now. Start telling us your plans and let's go through it together. Very, very key point, because we've heard some of IT folks think that this is what was required. That using the specification does not require all your systems to be rewritten or fixed. There are ways to translate the data from your current database structure so that it can be communicated through the APDS spec. And we are actually through APDS, we're developing different ways to do that translation. It's something that we've been doing with the different data specifications that we have to integrate with. There has to be a way to translate between different data specifications as well. So we can help with that. And again, this is where the forums will be a great place to get information and ideas of how to do it. As you go through the steps, understand your data. Take a look at the data definitions compared to your existing data definitions. And then identify which data can be converted to the data definitions and which may already be in the same data definitions. I think it's critical that you discuss data definitions with your technology solution providers. If the data is not defined properly, you will never be able to share your data equitably fairly and easily, you'll always run into problems. So spend the time understanding what does your data mean, and that'll be a really accelerate your adoption and sharing of data with the global community. Again, set the expectation. Don't expect your IT teams to be able to change everything in a week. It's going to happen over time. And again, I think Mike's example of how they were doing it at Sacramento is a perfect example. It's an evolution, and it'll happen faster if you try to evolve it rather than trying to slam it in. And remember that the specification is about sharing data. We aren't telling people how to run their parking facility. We aren't saying which is the best software to use. That is up to each entity and operation to decide what's best for them. The data specification just tells you how to share the data between systems or within a system. Here are some examples of language that's being used in RFPs to define the expectation. Actually, I think one of these did come from you, Mike, if I'm not mistaken. So two different ways that it's being injected into RFPs for you to use and consider. So again, it's not a deep, full-blown. I think to Mike's point, it's just having a discussion with your technology providers to understand what are they doing and do their intents meet up with what your objectives are. And reinforcing that, be realistic. Don't try to make change overnight. And then that gets to the APDS community. And Chris, I don't know if you kind of want to talk about what we're trying to do with the user group. And the one thing I will stress is the APDS from the onset has always been led by the industry. It's been led by leaders of the in the industry, various parking professionals, and now mobility professionals who are guiding and setting the priorities of what is critical for us to focus on. So, Chris, I don't know if you have anything else to say, or
well, it's funny. It was one of my questions. So I don't have an answer, more of a question. To me, to move things forward, I see the obvious path where municipalities can require things through RFPs or request. And I understand from 10,000 feet why the standard will help the industry overall. But I guess what I'm trying to think of is what are the next steps, and what are the commercial advantages of the ABC company moving forward and doing some things. We all have struggled in the past, I think, with the data sharing, and I'm helping a competitor sometimes. So how do we kind of move past that, and what's the near-term goal and benefit of going first?
Yeah, so I think, luckily, whoever goes now is not first. There are many other technology companies that are already starting to adopt this. So that part, I think, is done. The key benefits that we're seeing, and when we talk to folks, it is the reduction in time and pain and energy required to get two systems to talk together. I'll pick on Sacramento here. Because I know City of Sacramento did a lot of data aggregation. Who knows what they're going to do with Mike King not there anymore? They could probably be a rudderless ship. But while he was there, they were doing a lot of data integrations and requiring a lot of their partners to provide data in a common way. And Mike, maybe you can comment on this. I'm assuming it took a lot of time and energy to get two entities to sync their data up to where it was actually useful to the city.
That's exactly right, Mike. The City of Sacramento has over 30 different providers that operate on some small or some large pieces of data for parking management, parking control, whether it's parks providers, multiple meter providers, multiple mobile payment providers, reservation providers, and so forth. And the challenge was every time a new provider was added because they were bringing some additional benefit that another provider didn't cover, then our existing providers had to write or expand their current APIs. And sometimes it got even into a fight on which provider's API was going to be used for a particular implementation. And it frustrated us, frustrated the providers and so forth. So when we first heard about APDS 3-4 years ago, that immediately sounded a gong that there was a solution down the road. And that's when we started making the plans that we had to make sure that all of our providers would conform to it. And as a matter of fact, some of the parking data is maintained by the city's IT team, and they were on board with ensuring that there would be a common way of communicating the parking data between the other entities and the city's IT team, so that we would have a consistent way of sharing the data.
Thanks, Mike. So and maybe to more specifically answer your question, Chris, what is in it for the technology providers? It's reducing the cost to do something that they're going to have to do anyways. Mm-hmm. When a city or any operator, it's just reducing the pain and suffering and negotiation and trial and tribulation, because I know there are different levels of technology providers out there, some who have very experienced and talented people working on their technology, and other folks that may have a great idea but don't necessarily have that same expertise and level. And it's very frustrating when you're trying to get an API to work, and one side or the other side isn't fully up to the technical task. And so the standard helps eliminate that, because it's a very, here it is, present your data this way, ingest it or export it, and then it kind of goes back to the value of each system.
And Mike, I would add that the data standard is going to be developed by us or someone else. So your option, you know what I mean? We have multiple, somewhat competing standards, and we're trying to work with those that make the most sense, whether it's mobility, transit, whatever. And I remember having this conversation when we were developing Green Garage certification. A good part of the intent there was, let's develop the standard so that the industry experts can lead and not follow. So this is where, when folks get engaged, just like you have and all the other folks who have supported and invested time and hours in the working groups and the documents, you're helping to shape the standard so that it works for us and that it works in a smart sort of transportation ecosystem. So it's one of those opportunities where it's actually a rare opportunity to get involved and actually shape what happens. But if that's a selling point for folks, I don't know, but happy to, happy to out and talk about it more.
That's a great point, Rachel. And that's what we're trying to do. So this user group's focused on owner operators. Next week's user group is more focused on the technology providers. And we are trying to keep so that no one has a competitive advantage, if you will. This is meant to be I'll use the term democratic, maybe that's a little too utopian, but it is meant to be what does the industry need? How does this work best for everyone? We aren't trying to, and we're not going to say, here's the best way to use the data, here's the best operating practices. All we're going to do is define data definitions and then provide standard formats on how to share that data. How someone manipulates the data within their system, that's their value proposition. And there are a lot of great different technologies that do great things to convert data into meaningful value or information.
Okay. Then I guess on to the user group for my next question would be, as a group, what do we do next besides, kind of review the new standards? What's your thoughts on how this group and next group next week, take the next steps?
Yeah, I think, and it's great lead into the slide. I mean, one obviously is providing feedback, but it's creating that community so that we can see what's being developed, how is it working. There is probably a little bit more activity on the European side because they actually have a couple national parking platforms being developed. So they're already doing some of this. On the North American side, I'd like to try to get that going or connect into what the Europeans are doing and sharing that through here. So I think creating that community, trying to do outreach between different groups and more knowledge sharing and experience sharing so that we're comfortable when we run into a challenge or a question, we're comfortable enough to raise our hand and say, how does someone else solve this? How would you do this? And then I think through that, I mean, the end result is that we improve the adoption rate of it. We have outside industries are already looking to the APDS standard. Now it's a matter of internally, the parking and transportation and mobility industries, building up the data so that we can share it in that way. Because the rest of the world, and I say the rest of the world, the other industries are already looking to accept the data in this format. All right, so kind of at the end, and we can open it up if there's any other comments, questions that people want to talk about, more information that would be useful to you as you start or continue your process of adopting it. Please go out to the website. The release 3.0 documents should be out there in the next couple days. Please take a look at them. Start going through the API framework. Those are actively used API formats that are being used in parking platforms today, so they are working. And actually, some of you who with various technology companies may already be using them in some of your work. And then please start to engage in the forum, and let's see if we can't build a good community through the forums. It takes time, as we all learned from the IPMI forums. It takes time and energy to get engaged and get involved and start the dialogue. But I'm sure that with the effort and time, we can get some good dialogue going there, which I think gets to your question, Chris. Like, so how do we get that knowledge sharing started? Any thoughts or questions or needs from anyone?
Sure, I'll go first.
Yeah.
I live in the seam between parking management and parking technology, so I'm going to be attending both sessions. And one thing I do know is that on the technical side, there is a formal framework for submitting changes to the documentation, to the standard. On this management side of it, obviously, my organization's lucky enough they have somebody like me that can translate, but a lot of organizations don't. Is there going to be a standard way for submitting organizational changes on the management side, sort of it, so to speak, so that if someone has an idea on the management side, but they're not sure how to express it in an API or in a data modeling format, is there going to be a formal submission process for those ideas?
That's a great question. I would probably say let's start it off in the forum, because to your point, Kevin, the comments are much more technical comments on the specification itself. I would propose putting those into the forum, but I am open for ideas of how to best handle when it almost sounds like, Kevin, you're saying someone has to present a new use case and is looking for how does that use case get applied using the specification, and does the specification actually support the use case?
That's a good way to put it. Yes.
Yeah, I would suggest starting in the forms, and maybe that's a form area, Rachel, we can create as a use case or application area so that people can go in there. Any other ideas on how we might be able to best collect that? Okay, well then we'll go with the form as a path forward.
Okay. My other concern is, I believe looks like we're going to be calling our end customers rights holders, according to the data. Is a nice distinct way of saying what our parkers are going to be, or they're going to be right holders. Has any consideration been given to the retention laws that vary from locality to locality on end user data?
Great question. So there is actually one of the things that the APDS group is probably going to be starting in its next working group. So, boy, Kevin, you just gave me a great advertising bit there. Thank you. We're going to be probably focusing on data security and the various laws that exist out there. I always get these two back. Is it GPDRS or GDBRS for?
GDPR.
GDPR.
So, yeah, obviously, our friends the Europeans are much more focused on GDPR than we have been to date, but we have been applying, for even our own communications within APDS, we apply those standards for communication because they're much more stringent. So we would anticipate doing that. But in terms of tackling data security, it's GDPR.
Yeah, so for GDPR, and then California has its own public. So what the next working group is going to be is understanding within the data specification how those regulations need to flow through and into the data specification. So that's actually one of the things that we are exploring now. So if you have an interest in that, please send myself or Rachel an email, and then we can kind of get you into the mix. That is going to be a very interesting and collaborative group because it's going to include Asian, European, and North American representation, and South American and African if we can get it as well. But we know that there is a lot of focus in Europe and North America on that topic, and I think that's what our next working group is going to be coming out of APDS, is incorporating that those data regulations into the specification. Other comments or questions?
So, Mike, our next user group meeting will probably be fall-ish, like September-ish, once we've processed the comments. We'll have obviously the one next week for that other group. And then if there's, questions, other, interests along the way, by all means, no need to wait for that. But we also know that people need time to review the documents. They are substantial.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And feel free, again, reach out to me at any time if you want to talk through it. If something doesn't make sense, I may, or I may not be able to convert 20 pages of document into 5 or 10 minutes. I also may be able to take 5 to 10 pages of documents and turn it into an hour. So you're at your own risk.
Terrific. Well, Mike, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for joining us. As I mentioned, the recording will be available soon. Making it 5 minutes would be great, says Jay. We all agree. There you go. So if you'd like to tune in next week, please feel free. And always, please reach out to us with any questions, comments, and feedback. Have a great rest of your day.